Hey, I'm Taylor Dorsett, and this is the Professional Technical Interviewee. Technical interviews are hard, and every company does them differently. On this show, I interview engineering leaders to see what they look for in technical candidates, and then they perform a real technical interview with me. I hope you enjoy. Great. Well, Ross, welcome back. We are now in the technical portion. So I have a VS Code terminal up. I got a web browser. Ball's in your court here. I am ready to take on this technical.
Great. So we're going to dive into an exercise that I like because it's, there's no riddle here. There's no deep algorithmic problem to solve. And I hope that it's comfortable to approach with any technology, any development environment like you've got up with VS Code. I think before we get started, what I always like to tell folks is if you have any questions, any confusion and ambiguity at all, let's stop and hammer that out. I want to make sure you're not having to do any guesswork. Second, Google is your friend. Look up anything you need to look up. I know I do all day long at my job. And then third, this exercise is designed such that we won't have enough time to finish it. And so that's okay. And at some point, we're going to get to a moment where we might say, okay, even though we're dealing with this problem that we haven't yet solved, we're going to stop here. And that's not indicative of failure mode. It's just we've spent some time working through a hard problem and it will be time to stop. Cool. So, and I always like to tell folks, I want you to use the language you are most comfortable in, the development environment you are most comfortable in. I'm not looking for any expertise in any specific language. I want you to be at your most comfortable. So, looking at your screen here, I just couldn't tell you what
the JavaScript is where.
Great, awesome.
Is this large enough? Can you see this all right? I can zoom in a little.
Yeah, maybe once or twice.
Can I? I thought it was just. I'll figure it out.
I can. I'll be all right. And
Control plus. There we go. How about that?
Amazing. Perfect.
Cool.
So I'm gonna paste in Zoom chat, and I hate pasting stuff in Zoom chat because it always screws up the quotes. But it's a real simple command line prompt, if you will. And so this is if you were writing a program in a Ruby. Ruby is the command, lcd.rb is the file, and then there's an argument. It's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And assuming we'll do it in JavaScript, maybe using Node, that's entirely up to you. I want your program to, we'll see if this pastes correctly. Yeah, I think it might have butchered see if you can copy that out of Zoom. If not, I can hop over to a paste bin or something.
They supposed to be boxes.
Yeah, it butchered it in some way. Why don't I try a real quick paste bin? Because it's important that it's really clear as to what's showing up there.
Am I banned? IP banned from pastebin?
Maybe. I'll tell you what. I'll send you another link. This happens to have some solution material at the bottom, so I'll ask you to just use this link for the copy and paste near the top of the screen, and then we can close the window.
Okay.
Yeah, this is such a good example of like what happens on every remote coding exercise. So you see that 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Oh, cool.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's like ASCII number art.
Yeah, well, that's what I wanted you to see because it's so clear when you get to see it in that way.
Yes.
And so what this is actually representing, maybe you're familiar with one of these, maybe you're not, but like an LCD calculator display where it's, I think they call it 7 segment, 8 segment. I don't know. Clearly, I'm not very familiar with it, but the whole point of this exercise is I want to write a program where when we give it an argument of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it can print out to output that version of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so does that make sense?
That makes sense. Yes, this, okay, cool. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think it still is retained here. It's a little less obvious there, but that makes sense.
Yeah. Yep.
Cool. Well, that is interesting. And something that strikes me is like, oh, how would this even be done? So it's a fun one. Cool. So let me make sure we don't need this. Write a program that displays LCD style numbers at adjustable sizes.
Huh.
Are we worried about that adjustable sizes piece right now?
I'd say let's ignore that for now.
Okay, cool. LCD style numbers. Great. I'll just get rid of this as well. It's relevant. Just to be displayed will be passed an argument to the program, which was this piece, right? Size should be controlled. So we're not doing this size piece with the command line as followed by a positive integer. Okay, we won't worry about that for right now. Example,
Yeah.
if your program is called this. Okay, got it. Cool. And I'm assuming that the rest of that prompt would have, what the size thing would be if we bump that in.
Yeah.
Interesting. Oh, I see how the size could be relevant. Maybe that determines how tall we might have something.
Yeah, you'll notice in the LCD segments, we're kind of using a size 2 right now, where each segment is, and it's, of course, it's stretched a little vertically because that's just what the font looks like, and that's fine.
Yeah. Let me just put this in here. Just a little.
Yeah. And I think, well, I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on what might be a first step.
Yeah, so it's an interesting problem because I don't immediately see how can I look at a 0 and parse, okay, this is the shape of that thing without defining. But this is kind of my first idea is, do we want to define each of these things, right? Because if we define this is the shape of this, then it would be kind of trivial to scale that up depending on the size of the number, right? Do we have a limit of what these numbers will be? Like, is it always going to be 1 through 9, or could we also have double digits so we're expected to represent?
Yeah, let's say 0 through 9 digits. But I'd say if it simplifies what we solve for at first, like, I think a great first step is, can you output something that looks like that 0, and that's it.
Got it. Okay, and our output is going to be in the form of, I guess this is basically art. It would be like strings that are. Is it basically one big string?
Yeah, I mean, the way I see that is it's what you've got starting on line 11 through line 17. It's I guess that's 7 lines that it output, and it's just outputting characters, but to us it resembles that LCD display.
Right. I'm just trying to think of the data structure.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we had a string, I think we could hold all of those things within it. That probably at least makes the most sense to me right now. So what, and I could show different test cases, but I think just to make sure I understand this correctly, if we had, well, this will be a pain to, let's assume all the numbers past 0 are not there, right? If our input instead is just 0, we would just have 0 be spit out, right?
Yep.
Without any of these other numbers on the right. And if our input was 0, 5, 9, we would have down here, it would be the same art with 0, then we'd have 5, and then we have 9 represented, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, great. Can I assume we're always going to have some integers here rather than, an empty integer or some other data type coming in?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a we should go with that assumption for now.
Okay, great. And are these coming in as integers, or are they a string that I need to parse?
It'll probably be a string because at that
Okay.
point it's an argument to the program you're running.
Yeah.
And if we got to run it a little differently to run it inside VS Code, that's fine. We'll approximate it.
Yeah. I think so with just if I did something like LCD with if it's a string 4 5 something like that to run it within VS Code, if I've defined my variable above that, that should work for that example. Cool. So what comes to mind is basically if we have just 0 to 9, or if we just want to have something come out, right? Having some type of I don't know if I want to raise the right data structure, but like digits, right? Where we've got what's this? Where for 0 we're gonna have. I guess if we want this to be scalable from 0 upwards, right? This would look like, or from 1 upwards, it would be this one, this, right? So I could, if I am looping through our numbers, right? I see that it's a 0. I call digits 0, and then it would spit out this, right? This first one. If I could, I'm trying to figure out can I wrap this in a maybe an object where I call this one 0. I might just make it easier, right?
Sure.
I've broken my 0 here, but something like that. This would be here.
Yeah, I think I'd make two thoughts. One, I really wouldn't worry too much about the scaling ability yet. If we get there, awesome. I'm more interested to see how we tackle the problem before we get to the scaling part. And then, so yeah, either we use that kind of 2-segment scale as our default, which I think works fine. Looks like you're making the changes for now. So yeah, we'll use that.
Yeah.
And I'll the 0 actually has, you've kind of cut it in half if you notice the example versus
we've got spaces here.
Yeah,
interesting.
and it's actually, it's like there's kind of the top half of it which uses 2 pipes, and then the bottom half that uses 2 pipes.
Ooh, okay, yes. Okay.
Yeah. And then that empty middle space is fine for 0, but then of course it gets used in like a 2 or a 3, stuff like that.
Got it. So what makes sense to me is if this isn't defeating the or basically solving that problem you're not asking, is basically I could build these each, right? Like manually, just if we're just going 0 to 9, or if we're just trying to do some limited data set, create each of these and then just loop through and call them, and then add, if we find 0, then just push that to some type of results array. So it's going to just loop through and look for the 0 in our hash map, pull that in, then it's going to look for the 5 for this example, then it's going to look for the 9, right? And then it will return some, I guess I'm kind of talking in the sense of arrays, but return some object that would have these 3 things in it because they're already predefined. That doesn't really build them all. Is that what you're asking? Like, does that solve what you're asking, or do we also want to actually build them without manually building them?
I think it's okay to manually build them, because the important part is just the input and the output, and however you get there, that's the journey we're going to go on. And I do think as a useful first step, let's just get a 0 output and show that we can output a 0, and then we'll go from there.
Cool. Let's build this then. What do we call this? Input string. We want to I haven't really decided exactly what I want that to look like yet, but let's say an object for right now. And then turn object in. This CPD with let's do 0.5. Oh, it's just a 0 for now.
Yeah.
And we should be 0, right? Is what we're expecting. So we wanted that result object. We also wanted digits, which I had as an array of, sorry, yes, I want that reverse, an array of objects rather than, you have an array of objects, where I want to call this one 0 first. And it, let's see if I copy and paste this, if it blows up, which probably will. Oh, nice. Okay, so I think do I need to wrap that in a string? Yeah, that's, how do I get this multi-line thing within our object?
Right.
How could I do that? Let's see. I don't think I can just wrap it in an array because we're gonna run into the same issues. It's gonna want yeah, it's not gonna like that. How could I
I think
represent
there's,
that?
yeah, I think about it, and I guess you could go one of two ways. You could think of it as one single string with new lines in it. And
Mhm.
I don't know if JavaScript supports this, but sometimes with a string, you can actually just do a backslash, and it interprets that other slash.
Let's see, I can go here and then backslash as new
Yeah,
line.
and so yeah,
Got it.
it knows that it's a literal new line that way.
Yeah, it's either that or that and one of the two. I think that should work though. If we're
Yeah,
okay, that would be great if we could actually get that as a string. And then it's expecting, is my syntax off here? I got an array. Maybe it doesn't like there we go. It just probably wants it. And
I think it looks like you're assigning, the zeroth element of this array to an object, but then the object just contains a string as opposed to like a property that I would expect an object to contain.
yeah. So can we just do close that? But it still doesn't. Okay, represent that. So for looping through, we could look at the first one and then this weird line, but that should be fine. That's just my VS Code editor yelling
Yeah.
at me. So assuming this is right, which is assuming a lot, that there's no syntax error there, then if we're setting this up actually work, I would write some type of for loop to take in each of these strings. Let's just try to push. So we just want 0 to come out. So can we call it an empty string right now? Maybe. Let's see. Result string. I don't know if we'll run into the same issue, but we might be able to do that. Result string is equal to digits. We want to take in our input string should represent 0. So that should access our first element. And this is where the syntax is a little funky. this might work where it's looking at this with our first input string, and then it's calling this this key.
Mhm.
Does that, I can run it to check. I think the syntax might be off, but does that make sense to you, what I'm trying to do there?
Yeah, let's see what happens.
Okay. What doesn't like assignment to a const variable. Yeah, that makes sense. Undefined returned. Well, returning something. So I don't know why it would be undefined. Digits input string. Let's just try to call this to see if I'm actually getting what I think I'm getting here. So I think that's our error is that's what I'm trying for, to have it spit out. Okay, so that's still undefined. So yeah, that's the syntax I was unsure about. If you don't have that in that, am I actually getting this? I'm expecting this to come out. All right, this first object, if I'm passing in 0 of this array.
Right.
Let's see. Okay. And then I thought I could do that, then calling. Oh, it may be that I need this form of 0. Nope. Maybe I'm thinking of how to call objects incorrectly, or how to call a. Yeah.
You know,
That's.
I wonder if what's happening is because what you have digits representing here is an array of objects, and then within each object, it has a property of 0. And I think the array access is working where you got digits sub input string. Then I think it's that additional sub input string where I bet the way you've defined that object, it's actually treating that 0 as the key as a string, not an integer. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I thought this would have. Oh, that wouldn't fix it though, because that's going to pass in a string, which it doesn't know how to handle. Interesting. Can I just have it as a string? Because then we're just going to look at the first one and we don't even need the object. Okay, I don't think it actually, it's not quite how we want it to print.
Yeah.
But I do think it's reading
It's
this.
picking it up.
Yes. Interesting. So I don't know if this is a VS Code thing, right? Of like, or this terminal, like it's printing differently because of this, or if this is I thought, let's see. Maybe I would Google to break new line. That's what it seems like to me, is that the issue is that while it may be slash n, I thought there was in a new line character. New lines on my. This doesn't actually have an example, but let's try it with the n. So I've seen that syntax before, and I thought that was. It doesn't seem to like that.
What if you do slash n and then slash again? Because like that's when it's complaining, it's like there's the statement has no end to it, but then.
Let's see. Okay. Oh, great. Okay, cool. So that does it. Cool. So that is the
So
0 we want. Yes. And in theory, this would work. Like if we had a 1 here, because I don't have the loop in here yet, but if we're looping through these, this input string, we would have something like input string index, right? And that index would continue to change. And because we're 0 indexed here, it should align with just looping through and pulling each one. So is that where we want to go next?
I think what I would recommend is let's just output 2 zeros next to each other.
Oh, 0, 0. Okay. So now we don't have to change our digits at all. Our return object might get messed up, but let's worry about that in a second.
Mhm.
So this is where we would want to do some type of loop. Index is less than okay, if we make this a string, I think that would make it easier for me to iterate through that.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think were we actually running this as a command line program, it would parse it as a string anyways.
okay. Input string dot length. And if it's a string, I believe I need the -1 so we don't loop off the end of it, right? Because the string would
Right.
be 0 index 2, and index was equal 1. Okay. Now let's see, rather than doing this here, we want to do that assignment within here. We would want to do, we're going to add that to the string each time. And result string plus equal digits, input string. So digits gets us into here, which is what we want. Input string, and then index would be what we want. So let's say we're looping through initially our input string. We get here, our index is 0, right? So the first thing we're going to see is digits, input string, which gets us into our string, and then index, which would be represent 0. It's going to take this first one and put it in there, or add it to this result string. Then it's going to start back at this loop. Index is now going to be 1, which would represent this character, which will index represents 1. So then when it looks at digits, input string 1, we don't want that because it'll be looking for the next element in here rather than 0, which is what we want it to. So we do want to iterate through our string, our input string, but we want it to call whatever the actual character that we're representing is. Interesting. How do we want to track that? So we could do something like that. Next digit equals index will be 1, but we want input string index the string, yes, and I think then we could pass digit into there, which would, rather than representing 1 at this point, index would be looking at the 1 space within our string, but index digit will actually represent input string
I think,
index, which I think would be 0.
yeah, on line 65, I don't think you want input string there anymore.
Input string.
Because you're pulling index digit out of the input string.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. We just want to pass in digit, index digit, right? Whatever that actual digit is. I might need a number conversion here. I don't know how that string conversion would be. And even with the number, the 0 might be funky, but I think this would work. Does that syntax look somewhat correct to you?
Let's see what it does.
Okay, let's see. Okay, so we got 1, 0. I did plus equals, so I was expecting 2. Let's see. Well, 2 things. I just want to index digit to make sure that it's spitting out what I expect it to.
Mhm.
And then I want to log result string because this plus equals could be acting not exactly how I expect it to.
Mhm.
When I'm just trying to shove this other piece into it. Okay, so we got 0. String. Is it because I'm not actually iterating all the way through? Do I not need our -1? Less than
Oh,
the
because you're
length
using less than as opposed to less
instead
than
of
or
less
equal
than
to.
equal to. Yeah, got it. So that should be fine. Okay. Oh, I got weird. Okay, let's get rid of this logging to see what it's actually returning. Okay, so we've got 0, 0. So they're not side by side anymore. It's a different problem. This weird 0 is because we don't have a new line maybe before or at the end, but we don't want a new line at the end of it necessarily, right? We want it to start directly next to it.
Yeah.
It's interesting. And I want to make sure. I believe this is the top of this one rather than the bottom of this one. But I
I think you're right.
just want to double check. Yeah, okay. So if that's the top of that one, and the rest of these are probably pushed over because there's no new line. Like if I had a new line here, slash and slash, then they'd all be pushed over. I got this weird 0 here now.
I think you've got a space after that new line. And so it's like it prints out that first 0 and then a new line and then a space that you didn't want. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So that'd be great if we wanted it on separate lines. But what if we want it to be next to each
Yeah.
other?
And so do you
So
have any
is
thoughts on, yeah, like what direction would you go from here?
yeah. So try to investigate what is causing it to basically spit on this next line, right? Because it's not like I have a new line here in front of it, which I would expect it to basically to always push it to a next line. Now I have it at the bottom, but that doesn't like, if these were all gone, would it be, I don't think it would go to a new line, right? But do I don't think I want to do some type of check where I'm removing all the new lines if we already have this digit in here, right? That might
Right.
be a solution, but it seems pretty convoluted, or
I
like
think
over.
maybe to like better wrap our heads around the desired result is if you scroll back up to the example output from the beginning,
Mhm.
and like we know we're not dealing with the other digits yet, but you'll notice like what was the first line of output in that, and it's actually not, the first line of output doesn't contain the entirety of that 0 digit. it
Interesting.
it like
Mm.
it shaved off the top of all the digits and printed them out.
Yeah. So it seems like it's probably writing it line by line rather than writing it number by number.
Yeah, and that's just because that's how terminal output and yeah, that's how terminal output thinks about printing stuff to the screen.
Interesting.
And so it gets really complicated when we add all those other digits. But if it's just two
Yeah.
zeros side by side, like how would you generate that first line that's just, the tops of 2 zeros side by side?
Yeah. So it makes sense to me to have some type of like basically rather than having one string that is this whole thing, is having, let's see if I can, maybe something similar to what I was doing before, or maybe we have whatever it might be. So line 0 would be for every what is it, space dash dash space, right? Like that's line 0 for A0, right? Then line 1 is this space this. And I, looking at this again, it seems like there may even be, we probably want a space on the left and right of each of these. There's buffer room maybe.
Right. It's like they all have a space on the outside of them as well.
Yeah.
Whether we represent that in the individual digit or, as you build it, that's up to you.
Yeah. So let's see. There's that last one. So this one would just be empty, empty, three. This one is space dash dash. So it makes sense to me that something like this might work. 4, 5, 6, right? So if we know that each line is going to be X digits tall, right? For each object, we would build it something like this. So then we could loop through, okay, let's get all our 0 line first, and it's going to look at, maybe we're even just building, I think the best way to articulate this. If we're iterating through our input string in some way, right? We look at 0, we see in our digits array, we've got 0, right? So we're gonna want to go through and look at the first line of 0, but then we're gonna want to look at our input string again, see what else is in there. Got another 0, then we want to do another line before we move on. Then we want to move to line 1 of our 0, move to line 1 of our next digit, right? Basically line by line, add that to whatever our result string is, and add whatever it is, new line at the end of each input string. Once we've said, okay, we've hit the second 0, there's no more things, add a new line to the end of whatever this build is. Right?
Yeah,
that makes
sense to me.
Makes sense. Let's see if I can I know how to do that exactly. I think so. Then we would want this as, this is what I ran into earlier. Is like, this not work as an object, and why was that? What was it looking for? Okay.
Yeah. And so I think it just wants some commas.
Commas, right? Yeah. Okay.
And to further simplify it, now that we've got this new way of thinking through how to print a digit to the screen, it might make sense to go back to just like, can you print a single 0 with this, with these like segmented representations?
Yes, that would be great. Okay, let's see. Can we? So we go back to having a 0 in here. Got a result string, which I don't think should change. Leave it the same for now. Get our digits, we're gonna work through it. So as we iterate through, we have our first index. This line for a second. Digits index. So it's gonna, that should call our first object, just to make sure I'm not crazy. That should just spit out this entire, oh, it's gonna look funky. Index. Is that gonna spit out just our first line? Undefined. Oh, I think we're getting the same thing where it wants a dash dash, right? So it wants the key value syntax.
Earlier, you said something interesting where you said, like, if we can rely on the fact that it's always this tall, and I think I think that's kind of key. I think we can rely on the fact that there's always going to be 7 lines of output as we like build this string.
Oh, that makes sense. Because if we always know there's going to be whatever 6, 7, then well, I think we're still looking at some type of nested loop if we did that, right? Like, we could just, I think we could iterate through like a for each for like each of those. Or we could just have a loop within here, right? Where it's while indexes, whatever this might be, while 2 is less than 6 or something like that. Is that kind of what you're saying? Is basically we know we have this set amount that we could loop through. So our second one would just be checking index 2.
Yeah, and then walk me through. I mean, I guess we could just see what happens when you run it.
Yeah, I think we some issue here, but okay, so we're back to this. Where basically it all comes out in one line. Which we want a new line if basically if index, I was looking at it before, is like if index is basically if this is the last thing in the or once we finished one of these, right, we want a new line. So like when index like we want this is tough. Basically to put like whatever it was, once we know we're moving to the next index, right? We want to put a once we're going from 0 to 1, we want to put a new line in there, right? I just syntax is all messed up, but something like that should get us to basically cut to the next line.
Yeah, and I think because when I think it through, like what I want the output to look like, it's a new line after you've added the part of the last character or the last 0 in our case.
Yes, right.
Yeah, so you're right. Like when index is equal to, I guess input string dot length minus 1, we know that
Yeah,
it's considering the last character.
yeah. So if basically equals that, then we want to add, I think the plus equal should just append it to the last.
Yeah, and then I think if exactly there, that's your new line.
Got it. Okay. Let's see. I'm not 100% confident in that. Okay, so maybe this looks like it's doing it before we start and at the very, I don't know, it's just doing, it's added 1 here, right?
Yeah, and so now, because what you really want is you want that new line after each line segment. It's unfortunately the line is a bit ambiguous here, but I so if we think through the output we desire, you're of your 7 lines that you're constructing, you're doing each line, you're doing 1 line at a time. And within each line, you're iterating over the digits that we need to like smash together. And so what strikes me is that I think the for loops might be in the wrong order, because I'm going first, I'm going over my 7 lines, and then within each of those 7 lines, I'm going over my my digits that I want to represent.
That makes sense. Because yeah, you said this is representing line 1, right? And we want to do all of these before we get into any of
Exactly.
these. Right. So let's pull this out here. This inside. And then is the new line be the same? My indexes are all kind of funky here, but this now will be in here, right? Because we want to within there. So first going to, if this is 0, first going to looking at 0, should be this first object. Index 2 also equals 0. So it's going to add that. And then if this index 0 equals our length minus 1, which it will in this case, our result string is going to get a new line. So that would then kick it to this next line, which index 2 is going to be 1. Index is still going to, index will be 0. Yeah, that should work. Okay. So I think
Slap
adding
another
another
0 in there.
0 in there should work. Maybe our, what do we not like now? Canonical property of undefined reading 0. It doesn't like this syntax anymore. So what is our index 2 now? Oh, I may do something that like I did earlier with the digit. So in the second one, this is going to be digits. So this is going to represent 1. So it should be this. I think it's looking for a second object in here, right? Because this index is now.
I think you're right, and that it's like a string versus numeric problem.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of tax stuff at work recently. So my magic is just throwing that around it and seeing if that fixes what I want. I don't think it's going to in this
what
case.
if you turn it into a string?
Turn what into a string? This?
Yeah, because like on line 60 through 69, it's like you're basically giving it a JSON object literal.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, making those keys, I don't know this for sure, by the way, I'm guessing, making those keys strings, I bet that didn't change anything because they've always been considered strings. And why it worked before, I don't actually have a good answer for, but
well, my VS Code hates this. What linter do I have on? Can I turn you off? It does not. I have all this autosave stuff on.
yeah,
where it immediately tells me no.
I think it's okay. I think then on line 75, if we just say that index 2 is, I don't know how you convert it into a string. Is it?
I don't know either. I don't know if we can do the same thing. I doubt it. Where I go? Can I do something like that and then just wrap it in a string? I don't know if this is, or wrapping it back ticks. I will be a little surprised if that worked, but I think it might. Let's see, still the same issue.
Yeah, it didn't like that. There's got to be like can you not just wrap it in a string function? I don't actually know, but
I don't know. But I thought next to it's looking at 0. It doesn't actually. Oh, this is really wonky. Okay. I will look up the string function if this, okay, that should work then. It looks like it's getting spit out as a string. But maybe not. To string delt stack. They're just saying plus. That seems.
There they
Okay,
describe what you were
that's what I
doing.
was trying to do that. But
And there's a string function.
Yeah.
You know what? I bet we were looking at the error wrong.
Yeah.
I might have led you astray.
It's reading 0.
Yeah, so we've butchered what index 2 is becoming, but
yeah, why isn't index 2 1? Oh, sorry, when it says reading 0, does it mean here or does it mean here?
it's, well, cannot read properties of undefined. And so I think what it's actually saying is that digits sub-index is undefined.
So digits, so is it looking for digits 1? Let's check. I think that might be it. For our error, we should see 1 spit out. Okay. So it's looking for 1.
And oh, we're not using input string anymore.
Right. That.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Input string index. And that first one just happened to work because it was a 0.
I think so. And then that second one.
And then this might, all this weird syntax might be killing it now. Let's, oh, cool.
Whoa.
Okay, there we
Ta-da.
go. And we could put, if we wanted those extra spaces, we put spaces on the right.
Yeah. You've never been so happy to see 2 zeros side by side, huh?
Yeah, that's great. Cool. I think that's probably, unless you wanted to do more, that's probably a good amount of time, but I can see how this would be relative. Well, I say this, but it's probably some other complexity I'm not seeing, but seems relatively trivial to now add, okay, let's add multiple other lines. The complexity would probably come in, okay, we're adding in the end, so then this is all going to be scaled, which even that seems like, while it may not be easy, it seems doable because these are all 2 digits. And from the quick glance I did, a lot of these they're all kind of 2-digit representations. So you could just add 1 to each side as you go, which will get weird, but I think probably doable if you give me another hour.
Sure. Yeah. And that's I think that's that's the name of the game with this exercise, is that it gets to a point where it's not that interesting. We got to the end of the interesting part. The rest of it, it's like it's not fun for us to just to sit here and watch you like write out the 7 segments of all the other digits. Yeah.
So whenever I see nested loops, what I immediately think is there a way we can do this with a hash instead? Or basically optimize this. Is there a more efficient way to do this? Maybe using a hash or something like that?
I mean, at the end of the day, I'd love to hear your thoughts on like ideas you might explore, but sometimes you gotta use 2 loops. It's not inherently wrong. And you're right, sometimes 2 loops gives you that feeling of maybe I'm not doing this the most performant way, but there's no 1-to-1 law that says 2 loops is bad. And in our case, we know we got to loop over those 7 output lines, and we know we got to loop over the individual digits that were provided as input. And I'm sure there's a code golf way to do it without a nested loop, but I think what I like about this is that the code has written really well kind of follows how we would think about this logically, and just like, how do you build that string, that multi-line string with all the different digits in it? And so I'm there with you, and I think it's okay.
Cool. Great. Well, thanks so much. Anything to plug? Where can people find you? Are you hiring? Where should people find you online?
Yeah, absolutely. Elastic is always hiring. I'd love for folks to come work with me. I'm Ross Allen Bell on Twitter and Ross Bell on LinkedIn. I hope I'm not too hard to find. But yeah, and I think, recruiting and hiring aside, if folks ever want to chat through stuff we've talked about over the last hour or so, or anything related, I love talking about this stuff. No matter where you are in your career, I was there once in the past, or might not yet be there. And if I can be of any help, I'd love to be.
Yeah. Great. Well, it sounds like good people, interesting work, and you've all heard of Elasticsearch. So check out Elastic and get in contact with Ross. And thanks so much. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Taylor. It was a blast.
Thank you for watching the technical interview portion of the Professional Technical Interviewee. If you want to tackle this interview question, you can find it at github.com/professional technical interviewee. New episodes are released on the first 4 Thursdays of each month. Find us on YouTube at youtube.com/Taylor Dorsett, or on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on new episodes. And remember, keep practicing.